Great. I'm just going to quickly introduce our panelists. We've got Caitlin Peeling, who's the Sustainable Sourcing Cocoa Manager from Hershey's. George Watene, Program Manager from in Kenya from the Global Coffee Platform. I have the pleasure of seeing George again for the first time in about maybe 10 years or many, so it's a pleasure to see you again. Jacob Adzikah, the Chief Executive Officer for the Chamber of Aquaculture, and Lisa Barratt, Senior Manager for Africa Programs at Better Cotton Initiative, and finally Nurudeen Adam, the Internal Audit Manager at Norpalm, Ghana. So we've got a range of sectors covered, and we're going to break down some of those silos today, as we were just discussing. So I'm not going to give a huge introduction because we want to have plenty of time for your questions during the course of this session. So I've just given you advanced warning as we move through the discussion to think about what questions you want to ask the panel. And as we start off, we're going to be looking at very sort of practical questions around the role of voluntary standards, the opportunities, the impacts, and as we indicated earlier today, the challenges. Where are there improvements needed? Where are there barriers or bottlenecks in supply chains that can be addressed? And I was intrigued by the comment earlier about inertia, and inertia could be that you just always stay the same. But if the inertia is going in the direction of continuous improvement, you can use that inertia in a positive direction, right? So we've talked a lot today about resilience and about the challenges in keeping up with what's happening in the world, and therefore what that means for adaptation and change. So as we think about what improvements are needed, I'm thinking about how do we use that inertia in our positive way, I guess, for moving things forward as we evolve, keeping the world and needs and producers in mind. So to start off, we're going to do a similar format as the previous panel. We're going to have some initial thoughts from the panelists. So I'm going to, I'll call on each one of you for a few words on your reflections on where sustainability standards are adding value to support supply chain sustainability and resilience. And I'm going to start off with you, Caitlin.
Okay, now is that on? Yes. Great. So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot as we've come into this day today is where have we been and where are we going? And I think that kind of sits a little bit as well with some of the reflections we heard this morning. I really liked the, what was it, prepare for tomorrow today. So if we think about where standards have added a lot of value, closer? Oh, sorry. Where we think about where the standards have added a lot of value in the past has been this sort of defining expectations, driving a lot of transparency, and creating mechanisms for accountability. If we look forward, I think there's a challenge right now as we see this pressure coming from human rights and environmental due diligence moving from voluntary into mandatory. And because we have some of that taking a pass-fail approach and this kind of binary decision-making, and yet for those of us who are close to what happens on the ground, we know that sustainability is not a pass-fail. Resilience is not a pass-fail. It's a process of continuous improvement, as Karin mentioned there. So I think one of the challenges for adding value going forward is really thinking about how do we adapt to this mandatory environment while still driving for continuous improvement and really thinking beyond a compliance perspective, right? And thinking about how to tackle root causes together and how to think wider than simply a corporate choice of standard and sort of broader collaboration in the sector so that we can tackle some of the root causes. So that's a little bit the frame I have right now. Is there's a significant role for standards, but there's a significant role for everybody in the sector to step back and think about how do we make this transition.
Thank you, Caitlin. I'm going to move now to Jacob. You could share your perspective from the aquaculture sector.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. From the aquaculture sector, standards bring a lot of value to our sector. If you look at the entire value chain, you could see that, yes, following the basic standards or national standard has brought some value. Just to put the conversation in context, Ghana has 3 main sources of fish, right? We have the marine, inland, and aquaculture. But if you look at the situation we have in hand at the moment, the marine and inland sectors are depleting very fast, and the only alternative is aquaculture. So there's so much pressure on the aquaculture side to produce more to make up for the fish deficit we have in Ghana at the moment. And to achieve that means that we need to have stringent standards in place. So through standards, for example, protecting the ecosystem at the moment, because if you don't protect the ecosystem and we create another crisis over there, it means that Ghana will have limited source of fish. So standards are gradually bringing a lot of value to the aquaculture sector by protecting the very ecosystem that is used by the sector operators. Apart from that, it's also helping us to unlock finance. So until recently, the investors, financial institutions, etc., were not that stringent when it comes to financing activities in the space. But for some time now, they are gradually asking for stringent standards. They are interested in the kind of production standards that we follow in. They are interested in the social standards that we have in place and other related standards along the value chain. So you can see gradually we are unlocking finance for the aquaculture sector, especially for the large businesses. But on the other hand, the SMEs are struggling because most of these SMEs are not following the basic standards that we follow. So you can see that if you follow the standards, you bring value to your business. But if you're not following the basic standards in the aquaculture sector, then you are not bringing much value. At the same time, standards are promoting transparency and bringing some enhanced collaboration among stakeholders. Because in our sector, we share common ecosystem. So, for example, if you're operating on the Volta Lake, we have to share the resources with inland fisheries operators and the host community as well. So, through strong collaboration with stakeholders such as the regulators, the other players within the space, we are able to avoid conflicts and at the same time protect our ecosystem. So in our aquaculture sector, I can boldly say that standards are gradually bringing a lot of value to the sector.
Thank you. Lisa, from your perspective in the cotton sector, what would you like to share with us?
Thank you. At Better Cotton Initiative, our word beyond compliance is impact. So if we look at to meet compliance, compliance is the vehicle to impact. And that impact is what actually brings ultimately the value to the farmer. So by adhering to the standards and improving practice and adopting improved practice, then the ultimate aim is improved outcome, improved living, improved economic situations for the farmers. So for standards to drive that in the ecosystem, and I think as sustainability organizations and working closely at field level through our programs throughout the world, is sharing that even with our country teams is by deploying the principles and criteria and the continuous improvement model, that what is the outcome? I think sometimes that's missed by the menage of sustainability standards there are out there, that farmers do have the whole audit fatigue. What are we doing this for? What is our value? What value are you bringing? So I think it's a very pertinent question, but to ensure that the principles and criteria we are being enforced by regulatory bodies and best practice does have the intent to improve lives and not just frustrate lives. And I think we have a responsibility as certification organizations and membership organizations to carry that through in the work that we do and through our message to the farmers as well as to policymakers.
Thank you. I'm going to move now to Nurudeen Adam to give us a bit of a perspective from the palm oil sector.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. For us at Norpalm, that is in the palm oil sector, sustainability is very key. We had our own way of doing things, following ethical, approaches, taking care of our workers, giving them decent housing, decent wages, taking care of our environment, the little land that our communities provided us. In actual fact, at Norpalm, we have our 14 communities providing land to us for our operations. The olive plantation in Ghana that straddles between two districts, Mpoho district and Ahanta West district in the western region. So our stakeholder engagement is very key. We're doing all of this because we felt that those were the right thing to do, provide good housing for our workers on the estate, have engagement with our communities, and then also make sure that we defend human rights opportunities for workers. But of course, that is not to say that there are no gaps in whatever we're doing. There were significant gaps. So RSPO, that is the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, that's a major certification body that we decided to sign on in 2016, came in to fill some of those gaps. It actually provided some form of benchmark for us to re-examine how we're doing things and whether they were the best in terms of global best practices. We saw that indeed it was beneficial, albeit we had some challenges from the beginning. But for now, I'll say standards, especially RSPO standard for the oil palm sector, has been very beneficial to us. I must add at this point that just last year, between February 2025 and December 2025, we're fortunate to have a co-funding grant with NIRAS, the Ghana Private Sector a Competitive Program 2 by SECO, as a Swiss Secretariat for Economic Affairs, supported us in improving our mill operations to ensure that we achieve efficiency, trust, sustainability, and inclusiveness. The bottom line was inclusiveness. It actually led us to even hire a female engineering worker for our mill to supervise the operations of that particular equipment. And it's important, if we weren't certified, we probably would have missed out on this opportunity. So in a nutshell, standards have been good for Norpalm Ghana Limited, especially for the oil palm sector. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, George, your perspective from the coffee sector.
Thank you very much. And again, I appreciate the different people that have mentioned about certification in different commodities. But then coffee happens to be one of the world's most standard-intensive commodity. And of course, with positive and also maybe a few warnings. of what we've learned from. So at GCP, with multi-stakeholder members and about 10 country platforms, for us, the pre-competitive model is what works. So members compete on markets. So they'll be out there trying to get the best coffee in the world. But we've realized, and with lots of lessons from standards, that for sustainability, we need to collaborate. So we need to work together on particular issues. And for us, either through ISEAL or at times through our members, we've realized that pre-competitive wins on issues like, for instance, on pesticide action, for issues on living wage and benchmarking of that. And even before the due diligence requirements were out there, I remember, for instance, through ISEAL and in the Delta program, we were already thinking about issues of how we show impact in forest conservation. So before then it flipped on the other side on us and so forth. So for us then, that's the fact that standards have supported in thinking about, collaborating and working together is also something that we are testing at the national levels. I said we have about 10 country platforms, whereby in those countries, then you're working together with government, private sector, buyers, and last but of course most important, the farmers, in then seeing how do we get through that. And if you look at some examples that we even saw as late as last month, when the European Commission was talking about simplification, one of the things they mentioned, if you look at a product like coffee, they mentioned a few countries that are working really hard on certification, Kenya being one and Ethiopia being another. And the reason things have moved to the level that they've moved is because also those countries also happen to be some of the most important ones, whether it's for rainforest or for Ethiopia fair trade and so forth. So for us is the fact that yes, standards have brought us to a certain level, and I think due diligence is only taking the lessons that we've learned over time in terms of transparency, traceability, and so forth. But then also the fact that the standards were only resilient because of the farmers behind them. If we are not moving the needle on living income, if we are not moving the needle on forest protection and so forth, then of course the supply chains are not being built.
Thank you, George, and thanks to all of you for your initial thoughts. We've talked a lot about the value, and we've already started alluding to some of the challenges. I think that some of the comments here around multiple standards working in a sector, around how do you ensure that you get value to the right parts of the value chain. So some of these limitations that standards have, the valid criticisms that have come even earlier today around the cost benefit balance, around avoiding duplication. These are all, I like to think that you can't think of continuous improvement unless you know what needs to be improved, right? So that's part of the identifying challenges. So we're gonna move there a little bit right now, and we're gonna talk a bit about the themes of costs, incentives, and value distribution, which has really been highlighted, I think, already a number of times today. So Lisa, I'm gonna start off with you. From your view as a scheme representative, ongoing questions around incentives and value distribution. At Better Cotton, you work with thousands of farmers in the region to help them get certified and across international markets. How does this work financially? Who bears the costs? And what are you thinking as a scheme to ensure that value reaches producers?
Thank you. That's a big question. The Better Cotton Initiative works with over 2 million farmers across 23 countries. And we've got the prime model is there's no financial cost to the producer to implement the Better Cotton Standard system. And Better Cotton Initiative is a membership organization, and so a multi-stakeholder demand side provides the income for Better Cotton Initiative itself, and then there's a volume based on the cotton that is sourced, that is fed back to the producers through the Growth and Innovation Fund. So the more better cotton, certified better cotton that is sourced, there's more money and value in the value chain that is then distributed through this fund to reach the capacity strengthening needs of the producers. And this is applicable mainly throughout our smallholder network in India, Pakistan, Africa, programs, as well as to the large farms in Brazil and the States, and our benchmark countries have a slightly different model of financing. So ultimately, as well, with the mass balance approach that Better Cotton has done, it was about scale and reaching. I think the trajectory that we're on with the discussions we've even had this morning on traceability is, with increased traceability from Better Cotton, we're moving on to the next part of this panel, is more value and maybe some price differentiation could eventually reach the farmer in the cotton supply chain. It's a very long, complicated supply chain, for you go from the cotton growing to the ginner, to the spinner, to the textile, to the demand, and involving, I think, with more visibility on origin and farmer, and actually what practice the farmer is doing through the traceability, farmers could get to see more sort of financial value. At the moment, the financial value is attributed through improved practice. So lower inputs, improved soil health leads to improved yields. But there's definitely discussion of the premium that ginners might be making on certified better cotton. To what extent is that reaching the farmer? And the supply chain and the retailers and brands are asking these questions as well, and we must involve them in the discussion. And Better Cotton is, through our whole membership network, very much discussing this topic and how we are reaching farmers with increased value and revision of the cost.
Terrific, thank you. Nurudeen, I'm going to move to you. You've talked about your involvement with the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil. So you're one of the biggest players, Norpalm is one of the biggest players in palm oil here. What are the main operational and financial challenges associated with maintaining certification?
Thank you once more. You recall in my intro, I indicated that sustainability standards has been very helpful to us, albeit from the beginning when we joined RSPO, we had some challenges. One of the key operational challenge is the implementation of the standards themselves. I use two examples. We have a standard on the labor issues, and then one on human rights. On the labor issues, there's one particular principle that requires us to ensure that the workers, especially contract workers, doing core job or core activities are made permanent. Considering the seasonality of our operations, we get into the peak from January, February, thereabout, till about May, and then the actual lean takes off from August, September, thereabout. So majority of the times, our key operations happen from January till about May. So you have every hands on deck. At that point, you can say, we will comfortably be able to make people permanent. But beyond June, July, it's difficult to consider everybody permanent because of the financial constraints. But complying with this standard means that you have to cough up funds, whether you're going for bank loan, you're looking for extra funding from other financiers at exorbitant rate. It's really a challenge to implement that. The recent national interpretation kind of gave a relaxed position in a way, but just last year, May this year, when the new regulations came into being, there's a revised ISPO principles and criteria for 2024, which took effect from this year. There's another requirement that expects that when you hire somebody 3 consecutive times, as a contract where for the 4th time, the person must be made permanent. And back to the point, we are still a seasonal crop. We are still operating with a seasonal, crop. So it's still a challenge. But once you are certified, you always have to demonstrate that you are on the road to remain certified. So we are still in discussions with that. That's a key operation. Financially, as I indicated, implementing some of the standards, i.e. the PPEs issues, personal protective equipment that you have to constantly provide. There are some that we can procure locally, but the quality is an issue. The most quality ones largely have to be imported. And you see the dollar CD issues come to play here. But our auditors will always raise issue about the type of PPEs that we give to our workers. So that is an issue that we have. So we have to bring in, cost in terms of finance. Even the annual surveillance audit that we are supposed to, undergo, we pay between, maybe I'm not disclosing our auditor's name, but companies use different auditors, but I'm speaking from the perspective of Norpalm. We pay between $13,000 to $20,000, annually for each surveillance audit, aside the other logistical, the transport, the airfare, and all of those things that we do. For us at Norpalm, and for me, as somebody who is a key member of the RSPO committee, I would have loved that instead of doing it annual, we at least do it every 3 years and maybe do the recertification every 6 years. Because currently recertification is 5 years. So after every 5 years, you are supposed to recertify. But once you are certified, every year there's supposed to be an ASA, annual surveillance audit. And that's where the financial burden, comes to play. So it's another financial challenge that we face in remaining certified. And I think these are things we can look at. But we are all in discussion. Much as being certified is good, much as it gives you some leverage in terms of access to market, these challenges are not in oblivion, and we must address them as we move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Caitlin, we're going to turn to Coco. From Hershey's point of view, why does working with sustainability systems make business sense? And what do these systems need to do to strengthen their value proposition in the future?
Ooh, okay. Excellent question. Is this working better this time? Yes. It is, right? Yes. Okay. So for the first question being, where does working with sustainability systems or standards add value? I think one thing that's really important, which you just referenced, which is this question of access to market, right? So the standards that we work with define a minimum expectation for access to market with us, for instance, right? We have a commitment to independently verified cocoa. So that sort of setting a floor and defining that clearly and rendering that accessible is a really important role. And this is what we, see when we talk about scaling and the importance of sort of reaching as many cocoa farmers as possible with this kind of entry to market sort of approach. Where we also have a really strong partnership with the Rainforest Alliance, more from a programmatic perspective. And this is where I think it becomes interesting to think about how has that evolved and how does that leverage some of the strengths that the Rainforest Alliance has. So we have been working together on the Hershey Income Accelerator program in Côte d'Ivoire. And for us, I think a few areas where we see a lot of value that comes from the experiences that the Rainforest Alliance has as a standards scheme. So we've been able to work together on getting much more live access to information and really developing an evidence-based program where the farmer has access to a lot of data and information, where that's shaping the kind of coaching that they're receiving, and it's informing the types of incentives that are offered. And that work together, I don't think I can overstate. I don't think I can overstate the importance of all the lessons from field work that has shaped how that program looks. Because one of the things that we have seen is this shift from leveraging information on a sustainability investment purely for reporting purposes, right? To disclose what we've done, to communicate results, to pulling that closer and closer to the point of decision making, right? And really making evidence-based decisions from the get-go. And that's where I think there's this kind of underutilized potential in sustainability standards in terms of how much proximity there is to the farmer, how much rich information there is about what works and doesn't work, what actually matters from the farmer perspective that shapes choices that are made around adoption. So these sorts of questions, the partnership that we've had with Rainforest Alliance amongst other implementing partners, it is a programmatic piece of work, but I think it's really enriched by the experience from standards setting and field support and certification.
Thank you, Caitlin. You've brought up that theme of data and the many different ways that can add value that was brought up this morning in the Cocoa Pods contribution this earlier today as well. So that's certainly something that I think everyone's thinking about a lot right now. How do you not just make it taking information, but using that information to add value to all the actors in the value chain? George, I'm going to turn to you now. You've already talked about multiple standards in the coffee sector and what GCP is doing with the range of standards in coffee. We hear the criticisms around multiple audits, costs for producers. So tell us a little bit about how GCP is looking at the implications of rising compliance costs or duplicative costs for producers. What innovations or partnerships are you looking at there to see how you can have mutual recognition of audits and reduce the burdens?
Thank you, Karin, for that. So first, I don't think it's fair for a Kenyan smallholder to have 4 audits to sell to 4 different people, which at times happens to be the case, whereby, like we've had, at times standards help you access markets, but then different markets require different standards just to confirm the same issue. So for us, that has been a big challenge, especially because, like we said, coffee also happens to be one of the first to have had standards operate in it. And of course, this is not only real expensive, but then it also undermines the credibility of the different standards. And not because the standards are not okay, but just because, you know, there is no mutual agreement of what at the end of the day the person buying from that smallholder wants to confirm. So at GCP, of course, we realized this was an issue, and also coming from the point that we agreed certain practices that the different standards look at are a priority for the coffee industry. And we are seeing even some now being taken, for instance, up by the due diligence legislation. So for instance, deforestation, child labor, you know, some pesticides and so forth, those are not supposed to. And the fact that different markets or different market players tend to use a particular standard to confirm to themselves that then their supply chain is okay on those areas. One of the things we've done, and especially we were looking at these from reporting by some of these players, because the players also happen to be GCP members. So from that point, one of the things that we worked on together, and now we are working on it together with ITC, is the issue of an equivalence mechanism, whereby then the different standards operating in coffee are able to show, you know, how they are relating to a particular issue in sustainability in the coffee sector. And then the other part is also working with the different standards and other players in terms of bringing them together at country level, so that then they are working on the issues, and then it becomes a bit easier for the smallholders to comply with that. Whether it be, for instance, the issue of pesticides, working even with the government to then check what pesticides are allowed, and sharing with them the unallowed lists, either by different nations or by different standards operating in coffee. That way you reduce the cost of compliance. And then the other one we were trying to ask the standards is also mutual recognitions during audits. So for instance, we have a smallholder cooperative that has a market that is looking for fair trade, another market that is looking for rainforest. Why don't they then see whether they can use one person to confirm both parts, which then supports in reducing that cost? And then also then talking to the buyers on the other side that then are asking for these different standards, whereby then, for instance, and we're able to do this with 4C. So for instance, if a buyer uses 4C, but then comes to a cooperative that is already rainforest, then they are able to take that rainforest certificate and not require an extra audit for that. But then closer to now, some of the other things that we are seeing and we are pushing towards standards is shared tools. And I think EUDR has been one of the biggest examples in terms of how you share tools, whether it's on traceability, whether it's on issues. I think EUDR was more on geolocation, like what tools do you use for geolocation or risk assessment, and so forth. And then, of course, then trying to ensure that then, and we've seen these, for instance, the platform when we have these meetings to discuss a particular issue, and a pesticide has been one of the latest ones. You will have the representative from 4C, you will have the representative from Rainforest and Fair Trade coming, sharing their lists with the Kenya government, and then the Kenya government is able to get into dialogue and even come up with policy papers that then guide the way the things are done on the ground. But again, I think for us, we are seeing shared tools even in terms of training on sustainability, because we find that some of these requirements at times also need to be included in the training material that is used on the farmers, such that even when the auditors come and check whether you had a training on these, it's part of the curriculum that is given. So those are just some of the mechanisms that we've used to try and, make the system more efficient. And I think also the latest simplification report that we were saying, even people like due diligence are realizing that at times there are too many hoops that cooperatives and smallholders have to jump. And many of these, like the 4 audits I mentioned, are some of the things that we really need, low-hanging fruits that we need to come together and get aligned.
Thank you. So warning to all of you, I'm going to ask them one more round of questions, and then it's your opportunity. So think about your questions. So we've talked a bit about adding value. We've talked a bit about some of the challenges. And I want to talk now about driving impact on the ground. So the role of standards in driving impact on the ground. I'm going to come around to each of you. Jacob, I'm going to start with you. The development of a code of good practice for Ghana's aquaculture sector, and what's the ultimate impact goal there?
All right. So the motivation is coming from 3 challenges the sector encountered some time ago. In 2023, we had the Water River Authority spilling a lot of water from the Akosombo Dam, and that led to many farms being washed away. And when that occurred, we realized that most farms were sited at the wrong place. They didn't follow the standards in the sector when it comes to setting up a farm. So when we attempted to demand for compensation for these businesses, well, the Water River Authority said, no, those farms were at the wrong place and we're not going to compensate them. Then the second one is coming from consumer demand. We realized that consumers are demanding to know the source of their favorite tilapia and catfish. They've started asking questions like, is it coming from polluted water bodies? And thirdly, we realized that a lot of pressure is coming from our stakeholders, the government, development partners, and even consumers that produce more fish for us. Let me indicate that we have huge fish deficits in Ghana at the moment. We have over 570,000 metric tons deficit. And it's expected that aquaculture sector could produce more. However, we realize that the businesses are struggling to unlock finance to produce more farm fish to feed the nation. So we decided to solve some of these challenges by coming up with Code of Good Practice. So the Code of Good Practice is an initiative between the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, the Chamber of Aquaculture, and one of our regulators, the Fisheries Commission. And the focus is on getting most businesses to voluntarily comply with the existing standards within the aquaculture sector. So the code focuses on best practices. We have designed it in a way to fit our Ghanaian context. At the moment in our sector, we don't really export a lot of farm fish because the demand is very huge and the prices are very good. So let's think about the export market, but we want to make sure that we are producing the best for the local market. So, can I please borrow my paper? So the code focuses on 4 pillars. Legal compliance. We want to make sure that the businesses, especially SMEs operating in the aquaculture sector, have the right permit, license, are complying to the basic standards that is governing the sector. The second one, it focuses on environmental stewardship. That's the second pillar. We want to make sure that our activities are not destroying the ecosystem that we shared with others as well. Then, of course, the third pillar focuses on human rights. We want to make sure that we are providing the best or decent livelihood for employees. We want to make sure that businesses operating in the space are not involved in child labor, forced labor, just to mention a few. And lastly, animal welfare or fish health. We operate in a space that there is fish health challenges at the moment. So we need to position businesses to follow the best practices from production to processing and harvesting as well. So based on this demands, we decided to come up with a code of good practice. And businesses who are involved in this initiative are referred to as code of good businesses. And in return, we have designed basic incentives such as helping them have labeled. We want to make sure that your product can get to the right market and consumers will be very confident in consuming to consume products coming from these businesses who are part of this initiative. And we also having conversation with a number of financial institutions and impact funds to unlock more finance for businesses who are part of this initiative. And interestingly, one of the requirements is they have a tall checklist. And when you look at this checklist, you realize that if you follow the code of good practice, you are well positioned to unlock finance from these financial institutions and impact funds. So we, as a chamber, decided to embark on this journey with some of our partners so that we can address some of the challenges that is confronting us and ultimately produce quality farm fish for our consumers and also contribute to the nation's GDP.
Thank you. Super interesting. Markets everywhere for sustainable products, right? So that's really exciting. I'm going to come back to you, George. You've already spoken about collaboration between the sustainability systems that are part of the participating also in the Global Coffee Platform. What lessons on impacts do you have for from the coffee sector around alignment and collaboration and how that drives impact? The coffee sector is one of the most studied, probably the most studied sector when it comes to impacts. And so I'm sure you have some interesting stories for us.
Yeah, thank you again, Karin. So our biggest lesson is the fact that pre-competitive models work. So I think we've been competing for too long, and now we are at the point of realizing that pre-competitive models work. And in the last 4 years or so, we've had what we call collective action. And collective action, we started with the issues that were most problematic to even the standards themselves in different countries. And I think I alluded to at the beginning, the issue, especially of pesticides, because when glyphosate, for instance, appeared in many of the certification lists, for some of our producing countries like Brazil and Vietnam, it would either mean you don't have that coffee available in any certification whatsoever, or even in the markets that already refuse it. So what we've seen so far is that we get challenges that then force even the standards to work together and come up with more macro solutions to some of these problems. Because what we've noted with standards at times is there's a lot of depth, but with a few. And then when you get such challenges, then you find it's hard to work with a few, but when you come out, you also discover there are many more. So what we've seen, and I use the good example of pesticide, is the fact that it forced standards, buyers, practitioners, the government, and also the farmers themselves to work together on actually national plans to see how do we deal with this particular issue in the next 2 or 3 years. And what even the standards realize is that on such collective action areas, at the end of the 3 years, you have better alternatives for the challenge that you are having. You have more people informed and easy to sort of like comply with some of the requirements that you have. And at the end of the day, then you achieve also the breadth, even if not the whole country will be certified, but then it becomes easier then for the resilience of that particular supply chain. Then on the other part, standards working together on something like the Delta framework that we work together on in really showing how do we then show the impact that we are achieving from some of these things. So at least we have clarity on what metrics do we use then to show that we've gotten to the level that then happens to be a proper level. And then also when then you look at then working with national platforms and national country players, not only do they appreciate in the support they get in dealing with that issue, but then the thought of then working together on other issues then becomes something that is common and then something that is different. But I think the beauty is the fact that the standards put the first push. Because when they say you're not getting coffee that has glyphosate in rainforest fair trade, cafe practices and so forth, then you're sort of like being kicked out of the niche markets. And then that pushes then that kind of collective responsibility. And then shared architecture, shared resources that then of course lead to everyone being at least more and more sustainable.
Thank you. Nurudeen, I'm going to ask you one more question here. So when we look at oil palm cultivation, it brings up the question of importance of community rights and relationships. So tell us if you've got a view on how certification has helped on this topic and what might make sustainability systems more workable and impactful from a producer perspective.
Yes, thank you once again. Land rights in particular. One of the key challenge that is associated with most palm oil producers in Ghana is the issue of our land tenure system. Most lands or plots of lands are held by stool heirs. And for RSPO or the standard that we are associated with, there are some of the principles that requires you to provide proof of ownership of the land, especially for our outgrowers, the rest of the supply chain. For us, as a corporate organization, Norpalm, we're able to do that in 2016. We still have an expired portion of about 50 years, but our partners, the independent smallholders, the scheme holders were able to do that for them because they are part of our concession. But the independent, smallholders, some of them are far as central region. That's about 80 to 100 kilometers away from us. We buy fruits from them. Getting a title for where they farm is very difficult. So that is an area that has been difficult for us in terms of implementation of the standards. But when you have a challenge, sometimes you have to look at an opportunity around it and make impact in where you are operating. So because we are not able to get lands that we can confidently get a title for, and in addition to that, we have even our own nucleus shrinking because you have highway coming up on both sides. So what we have decided to do, aside that, we also have illegal miners, we call them galamsey in Ghana, illegal small-scale mine looking for gold. It's been discovered that where our plantation is, that's about 4,000 hectares, that is equally rich in gold. So it's been difficult. There are times you are there, you have the youth come in, they are coming to scavenge for gold. And the standards, especially through the stakeholder engagement, open us to even involve our key stakeholder, that is the traditional council. We have the military, which is close by 2BN. As a responsible producer, we don't use, as part of the standards, we don't use armed guards. Our security guards are not armed. And because we are also exposed to the vulnerability of the galamsey miners, we engage consistently and regularly with the 2BN, the police, and all of them. And through that, they'll be able to provide us with relatively stable security. Once we had that, we'll be able to do a lot of reclamation of the lands that were already destroyed. We had about 40-hectare land that has been destroyed through illegal, gold mining between, I think, from 2018 to 2021. So in 2022, we got a loan from the bank and we're able to reclaim the land. Now we have 3-year, old palms on that land, about 40 hectares. Initially, it was devastated. So we'll be able to do that. The chiefs supported us. The security, agency supported us. Through this stakeholder engagement, it's been consistent. Previously, we used to do that, but it wasn't regular. ISPO made it increase the rigor with which we engaged them. And once we explored that, we were able to do our own reclamation without any altercation from the youth anymore. That is making impact on them. And because of our continuous objective of providing livelihood for the 14 communities we work with, and then protecting the lands, what we also do is we have this no burning policy, and that is also as a result of our association with RSPO. Our gestation period for our palms are 25. Beyond 25 years, that we don't get much returns from the palm trees. The average yield per hectare reduces drastically. So at that point, we usually will fell them and replant. When we fell, we don't burn anything. We allow everything to decompose, and the soil fertility is reorganized so that at the end of the day, we use less fertilizer because we have organic manure and then the improvement in the fertility of the soil. So these are opportunities, the impact that we are making on the ground at Norpalm specifically. I'm not sure about other places, but I believe that largely the other plantations will be doing same. Because we are both a grower and a miller, we have two certifications issues, the principles and criteria aspect that deal plainly with our plantation, and the supply chain certification. Both we are okay, but our, the rest of the small, independent smallholders and the other outgrowers along the village, we still have a problem getting them certified because of what I alluded to in the beginning. They are not able to provide a proof of the lands on which they are farming. And this is an area that we still need to do to make meaningful impact in their life. The other key thing I would just want to add is that the price negotiation. First, we used to set prices, arbitrarily. Through the sustainability standard, RSPO, every year we have to engage with those who provide us with the fruits to determine what cost goes into their getting the fruits and eventually selling them to us. And then there's also a pricing mechanism set up by the Tree Crop Development Association, as a government agency, that Norpalm consistently try to abide by that. And so we pay the farmers relatively meaningful prices above the standards set by the Tree Crop Development Authority in collaboration with them, because we negotiate with them every year. And that has brought us relative peace in our operations.
Thank you. This is your turn, everyone. As I promised, we do have some time for questions. So I've got a hand right here at the second table back, and then I see there's another one back farther and another one over here. So let's tell us who you are, and it looks like there's a lot of hands, so try and be brief, each person, so we can get a lot of questions.
Yes,
in.
I'm kind of
Thank
brief.
you.
We're pretty brief. My name is Cephas, and I work with Kilimanjaro Terminals. I'm so impressed with the panel members. But I want to ask this question, and that is, sustainability also has to do with alignment across the West African continent or across Africa. There's this blowing wind that we are talking about, the AFTA, the Continental Free Trade Agreements. And I think that the better, from the Kenyan perspective, the better we align standards of, let's say, pest control geographically, the better it is for the seeds and the yields that we produce. So in order for us to do that, how are we doing with regards aligning with regards fertilizer application, because fertilizer application has got also effects on organic manure that actually brings up the yields. So how are we aligning our standards and certification processes across the geopolitical phase of West Africa or Africa, so that we get sustained good yields for the markets? That's my question.
Does anyone want to take a question on alignment across regions? George, that might be yours.
Thank you very much for that question. And I think on the coffee sector, especially at an African-wide discussion, we actually have a standard that was released in February of this year in Addis, under the African Union level, together with IACO, the Inter-Africa Coffee Association. But the idea was they are putting the same requirements that you will find in some of the certification standards that we have. So back to your call, I think at an African level, we also need to think about there's a clear description of that requirement that we need to have. For instance, like you said, if it's on fertilizer application, in terms of optimization of that. So the idea should be that is clear, but then how do we implement in our projects, in the things that we are working with to meet up to that standard? But that's only on coffee. I think on cocoa, there is also a bit of direction in that level at an African-wide level. But the next step is even the more challenging one of how do we implement to ensure that all the smallholders are able to meet that particular requirement.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't have in mind. There was two more people that I called out. I think that the mic is going where the mic is going. If you've got a mic, speak up.
Thank you very much. Kreider connected from Côte d'Ivoire, the German initiative on sustainable cocoa. I have two questions. The first one will be maybe addressed to the representative of Hershey here. Apart of the traceability and the other fundamentals of the UDR that are also due diligence related, what do you do, especially you as a company, to maybe prepare your supply chain, comply with the other fundamental, like Mr. Nurudeen also mentioned, especially the land tenure issues. The second question would be maybe open. I would like to know, how do you or maybe perceive the coexistence of the voluntary standards and the national sustainability initiatives that are now evolving? We have seen yesterday, for example, with the ISEAL and the Cocoa Board, that they are now discussing the national traceability system. Also, we have now the new African regional standards, thousands, that is being discussed in Côte d'Ivoire and also, I guess, in Ghana. I would like to know, how do you perceive the coexistence of the national mandatory frameworks and now the voluntary standard? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who would like to take that first question? That was for you, I think, Caitlin.
Yeah, I can take some of this. So if I just play back what I heard, I think there's a question about how are we approaching our support for producer implementation of the EUDR. I think it's important for, if I'm speaking here as Hershey, we're serving a lot the North American market and not just Europe, right? So for us, we have a deforestation free commitment that it goes beyond simply the European market, and that takes more of a continuous improvement approach than we see with the EUDR. So we have a long-standing commitment to supporting mapping. So we have been supporting polygon mapping at farm level through our suppliers for many years now, and that's something that applies whether it's for the EUDR or not. In terms of, I think you did ask specifically about land tenure. This we consider more a sovereign matter, and it really requires government support, and there have been, initiatives at that level. But I don't want to diminish the fact that it's an important need from a producer perspective for access to market. And I think if we think about some challenges around interpreting and applying the EUDR, some of the fuzziness around what legality actually looks like for a producer is something I don't know that really the folks in Brussels thought through before this came out, because we've had a lot of very specific guidance on how to consider plot by plot findings, and maybe some further reflection around how to have this kind of broad legality requirement in a way that actually reflects the reality on the ground. So I have a lot of empathy for the question, but I say that this is probably surpasses what an individual company can do. For the question about interoperability and the ARS, so the Africa Regional Standard, which has emerged out of also a long process that was a SEN ISO process that I think some folks in the room were living through this whole process for a very long time. So I would come back a little bit to one of the points that George was making. And if I think about it again from a company perspective, to me, there's two things here. One is for standard systems to have like clarity around how much they intend to serve as a due diligence instrument, and to be explicit about where they intend to support a due diligence obligation, so that the selection of a given standard to meet a due diligence obligation can be made relatively easily. And then this also promotes this question of like interoperability or equivalence and recognition. Because if I think of, I referenced earlier this challenge in terms of this shifting environment as we see like more mandatory regulation. One of the things that changes for a company is that now the use of certification is not simply to meet a voluntary commitment. The company is using a sustainability standard or independent verification as a way to demonstrate that it's meeting its due diligence obligations. However, most of these laws are saying you can't just use certification as a green lane. You have to demonstrate that you're doing your own evaluation of whether these standards are supporting you, how they're supporting you, what you need to be doing above and beyond buying certified material. So that puts a lot of pressure for company codes, for all of these things that you're talking about in terms of multiple audits, all your clients having their own checklist for you, et cetera, et cetera. So if we're thinking about how to have sort of a push for harmonization, this tension point we have lived in the cocoa sector over and over. And it goes, let's harmonize. And then, but we all also have this additional impact strategy that we want, where we want to be differentiated, et cetera. So part of it is on the core, on the part of it that is really about meeting an obligation, being really clear, and being really promoting interoperability, looking for efficiency, and driving this increased kind of collaboration. That would be the recommendation that I would have on that front. So I know that doesn't entirely answer the question, but it's a little bit how we would see it.
We had that last question right in the very back of the room, and then we're going to have to do our final round here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a simple question. We've heard all the good news about sustainable, voluntary sustainable standards, and the benefits that endures not just to the farmer, but to the environment as a whole. But I stand to be corrected. I don't see certification schemes voluntarily at scale. It looks as if using Ghana as a use case, some selected regions is where these certification schemes are concentrated. Is there a pain point? Can you share? What are the lessons? What are the challenges? Or is it that certification schemes are not looking at scaling up to national levels? And so if you can share what the bottlenecks are, is it the pain points being that the farmers, looking at the rigorous nature of audit and the standards to meet, as against the compensation, the premium not being commensurate. Where is the balance? Where is the challenge? Where is the pain point? Can it be scaled up? The second one is from the national perspective. We have an open door since there's a discussion of alignment of standards to reduce the burden of verification on the farmer. From the national standpoint, we are opening our doors for collaboration to build bridges. So in your deliberations, please consider how a national system can come in there to collaborate, build bridges so that alignment will be in place. But my first is a question just to learn.
Thank you. Thank you. The question of scale is really an interesting one. And I think that's probably relevant for every single sector that we're talking to. So maybe we could take two of you that have had less questions in this and think, I don't know, from an aquaculture perspective, do you want to share your thoughts on the questions around scale? And then maybe we can look at cotton as well.
All right, thank you. So from the aquaculture perspective, we think that the pain point is about the cost of certification. We realize that the cost involved, for example, in our sector, we need certification from the ASC, and sometimes when you look at the costs and the benefits, you are better off just not opting for ASC certification now because we are not really exporting much to other markets. The concentration or the focus is on the Ghanaian market at the moment. So usually most producers prefer not going directly for the ASC certification. They prefer getting involved in best practices. And that is the reason why after extensive discussion with ASC, we decided to design the code of good practice for the local markets, and at the same time preparing businesses to opt for the certification when they want to do export. However, in doing this, we ensure that it's aligned with the national standard and the global standard as well. So with what we're doing with the code of good practice, with a little effort, we should be able to secure certification to export to other global markets.
Thank you. Anyone, George, we've got Nurudeen has a comment as well also, and then maybe George. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, what I just want to add is probably the certification bodies should, through the auditing systems, should move from, pushing us to maybe just tick the boxes. I know we have an ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to have responsible oil palm as the norm. Responsible palm oil soya as the norm. Now, if we say key to that is reducing greenhouse gas, effect. Now we've provided the documentation, all the things that we have to ensure that the policies are there, the IPM, integrated pest management, and whatever is there. But we don't get communication, neither do the communities get communication that between, for instance, we have been on certification since 2016, 10 years on. We've not had any communication that says that your greenhouse footprints have reduced from this to this in the last 10 years. The communities, we've always had visitation from auditors to the communities that we have engaged them. But the engagement, what is the result? What is the outcome? So let's shift from the output to outcomes. So whatever we are doing with the actors, the rest of the people on the value chain or the supply chain, is the certification impacting their lives directly. We provide documents that we have negotiated prices with the farmers. Has this auditing or the confirmation of that gone to reveal that indeed the negotiation was in the favor of the farmer? That the price is actually in his favor. It has increased his disposable income. His livelihood has changed and all of that. We don't get those communications directly. Neither do we get that from the farmers or the people that we are working. So maybe let's move from achieving outputs to real outcomes. And I think that would improve. That would be a game changer.
Thank you. George, I'm going to cut you off actually, because I think we're at time and we're keeping everyone from lunch. So we're going to have our 1 minute quick last inputs. And George, if you've got a comment there that you want to throw into your input. So the last question to each of you, and we're just going to start right here and move on down. What is one practical change that you would want sustainability standards to make to drive impact and resilience over the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, 2-3 years time, we want to see at least 40% of SMEs operating in our aquaculture sector complying with the standards within the sector.
I think the sector as a whole needs honesty about the journey and not just ambition about the destination. And one more, so I'm giving 2, that the path that we're all on requires real investment from brands and supply chain actors. And so we need a demand side pull, not just a supply chain pull in the whole movement.
Okay, I'm going to cheat and also give 2. One is a little bit more the technical pain point we've been talking about. I really think there are opportunities with technology and data to be really driving efficiency in the whole audit and equivalence process. I don't think we've gotten there yet. I think there's a lot of opportunity we could leverage in the coming years. And then to this point on collaboration, I think it would be great if we could really unlock this more meaningfully. I think we talk about it a lot, but there's part of the reason we've been limited in progress is that the issues we're facing are systemic issues with complex root causes, and that takes collaboration beyond a single corporate entity, beyond a single sustainability standard, and really sort of broad sector-wide collaboration. So that's, I think, something underpinning what everybody's had to say that I just really want to call out.
Thank you. I'll also do 1.5. So a quick one. So the first part is, and also maybe to answer his question, is the fact that VSS spent the last 20 years building an infrastructure that everyone today assumes exists. So the issue of traceability, farm data, deforestation risk assessment, social auditing, and chain of custody, everyone is assuming now it exists, but it took the standards, the last 20 years to build that. And maybe the only unfortunate case is that they built it in depth, and now what EUDR, CSDDD is asking for is that we normalize this. So I think my last one is, of course, I would want us to think more about mutual recognition, and mutual recognition not only amongst the standard, but also from the national level and the regulations. So I don't see why a standard that has been there and perfected an infrastructure that EUDR is building on should not be greenlined. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, it's I mean, the timeline is given is 2 to 3 years. We've just had a new regulation that came into force this year, ISBO, because I don't know, and the next is probably take another 4 or 5 years. So, but I think that one thing we must do is to look at the national interpretations, the national regulations and other things, and try to align. The argument has always been, if the national one is relatively weaker, the RSPO one, which is stricter, must apply. But of course, once it's, even if it is weak, but the principle based, not just rules based, it meets the requirements of what is expected. I think we should look at aligning those. So going forward, and let's listen to the actors, because I know 90% of the players in the oil palm sector, I mean, with regards to RSPO, it's more South Asia and stuff like that. The rest of us constitute just about 10%, but still, it's important. oil palm is very important to us in Ghana, in Africa. So we should be listening to when the standards are being set. It reflects how we use that product and what we think will be sustainable for us. That's what I need to add.
Great, thank you. Well, I think it's time to wrap up this panel. So I want to say thank you to all the panelists. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to those of you with questions. And I'm sorry that we didn't get to everyone's questions, but we're going to have lunch, so you can ask your questions over lunch. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.